It's 10 o'clock. This is Sky News at 10. Our top story. A family in mourning but fighting back. President Biden meets Alexei Navalny's wife and daughter as his mother accuses Russian investigators of blackmailing her over the body of her son.
They started threatening me. Looking into my eyes, they say if I do not agree to a secret funeral, they will do something to my son's body.
New controversy tonight over the post office scandal as a letter is released from the chief executive of the post office to the justice secretary from January, asking him not to reverse previous Horizon convictions. A motion of no confidence in the Commons Speaker gathers pace as he makes an emotional defence of why he broke convention and brought chaos to Westminster last night. But as politicians debate process and protocol, the people of Gaza brace for a new assault. We'll count down to the climax of the lunar mission that could see the first American landing on the moon for 50 years and the first ever by a private spacecraft. Plus, firms are told to adjust the workplace for the menopause or risk being sued.
For the very things that make us unique, to be designated as a disability rather than an absolutely natural part of our bodies' lives is really complicated.
And we'll take a first look at tomorrow's front pages in our press preview from 10:30 right through to midnight. Good evening. Tomorrow marks the second anniversary of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. The war has lasted beyond Vladimir Putin's worst nightmare, but he still remains in power in Russia, with the recent death of his opponent, Alexei Navalny, illustrating the comprehensive nature of his control. President Biden had warned that there could be devastating consequences if Mr. Navalny died in custody. And tonight, he met Navalny's wife and daughter in California, saying that his legacy of courage will live on. And in Russia itself, the opposition leader's mother said that she's finally seen her son's body after he died in a Russian penal colony last Friday, but claims officials are blackmailing her to hold a private funeral without any mourners. Here's our international correspondent, Diana Magni.
Russia calls this the White Swan. Its newly modernised Tu-160M strategic bomber, nuclear capable, taken out for a spin by no less than the Commander-in-Chief this Thursday, who could not be more delighted with the handiwork.
The machine is excellent. It is truly of a new generation, as I told the commander of the aircraft.
Putin seems to be relishing the moment. Victory in the Ukrainian town of Avdiivka putting a spring in his step, shrugging off Joe Biden, calling him a crazy SOB, with yet another display of his nuclear capabilities and a second, unlikely endorsement of the incumbent US president.
You asked me who would be more preferable to us as the next US president, and I said that while we would work with any president, I still suppose Biden would be more preferable to us, to Russia.
That was before the news broke that Joe Biden had met with Yulia Navalnaya and her daughter Dasha, telling them that Navalny's legacy would live on through them and through all those fighting for human rights and democracy across Russia. 6 days since his death, Navalny's mother Ludmila was finally allowed to see his body, but told she would not be allowed to hold a public burial.
They started threatening me. Looking into my eyes, they say if I do not agree to a secret funeral, they will do something to my son's body. Investigator Voropayev openly told me, this is not working for you. Corpses are decomposing. I don't want special conditions. I just want everything to be done according to the law. I demand that my son's body will be returned to me immediately.
This mother, this family has gone through so much. Now to be told, according to the coroner's medical report, that he died of natural causes. And adding yet further insult, these tasteless remarks from the man who once ran Russia and now specialises in virulent commentary from his seat at the National Security Council.
Look at the smiling, happy face of Navalny's widow. It feels like she's been waiting for these events all these years to start her political life.
There is no doubt that a public burial for Navalny just weeks before an election might show a degree of support which Putin would not wish to see. But the Kremlin has turned him into a martyr. And now, to the anger and pain of Navalny's family and supporters, it is doing its very best to bury the consequences. Diana Magnay, Sky News, Moscow.
Today marked a significant moment in the cause of sub-postmasters wrongly convicted in the Horizon IT scandal after the government confirmed that legislation to quash convictions will receive royal assent by the end of July. But that development tonight risks being overshadowed by the release of a letter from the Chief Executive of the Post Office to the Justice Secretary, Alex Chalk. And our correspondent, Molly Malone, joins me now in the studio. So, Molly, what is the significance of this letter? What does it say?
Yeah, so this is a letter, as you say, written by Nick Reed, the Chief Executive of the Post Office, sent to the Justice Secretary, Alex Chalk, published tonight by the Post Office, but crucially written and sent on the 9th of January. And that matters because it was the day before the Prime Minister, people remember Rishi Sunak, coming to the Commons to exercises blanket exoneration of swathes of sub-postmasters who we know were accused of wrongdoing. And in this letter published tonight, they attach a legal note from Post Office lawyers, which is significant. I'm going to read it to you now, this key part. They say, in reality, it is highly likely that the vast majority of people who have not yet appealed were in fact guilty as charged and were safely convicted. Unless this is made clear to the government, it risks making incredibly important and expensive decisions on a completely false premise. I'm sure this point has been made or is being made to whoever is briefing Alex Chalk, but I know that points can be misunderstood or watered down by the time they reach a minister. And this is one point that cannot be made strongly enough. Now, clearly, in sending this letter to Alex Chalk, and importantly, that attached note from Post Office lawyers, the Chief Executive is raising the question of whether everyone should have had that blanket exoneration. In fact, in the letter, he suggests that 369 of the 700 postmaster convictions, they are legally sound. I think many will hear this tonight and question, was it right that the government pushes ahead with this blanket exoneration? But critics of the Post Office, I think, will likely see this as yet another sign of a potential vendetta against sub-postmasters. And I think really others might question and highlight the role of the judiciary and their independence. I think this is a significant development tonight, but really it throws up more questions for the Post Office, crucially, but for the public and also those postmasters whose future, yet again, looks pretty uncertain tonight.
And as you say, the date of the letter, crucial, the day before the Rishi Sunak announcement. Molly, for the moment, thank you very much. There was no let-up in pressure today on the Speaker of the House of Commons, Lindsay Hoyle, after a Commons debate on a Gaza ceasefire collapsed into disarray, with Conservative and SNP MPs walking out in protest last night after the Speaker broke with convention to allow a Labour motion to be debated. More than 60 MPs have signed a motion of no confidence, but the Speaker doubled down on his defence for his actions, saying that he did it out of a concern for MPs' safety. Here's our political editor, Beth Rigby.
After a night of chaos caused by his handling of a vote on a ceasefire in Gaza, the Speaker back in the chair.
I regret it. I apologise to the SNP.
And fighting to stay there, after dozens of MPs called on Sir Lindsay Hoyle to quit.
I apologise, and I apologise to the House. I made a mistake. We do make mistakes. I own up to mine.
His was to break decades of parliamentary precedent to allow all three main parties to put their position on a ceasefire to a vote. The effect was to let Labour avoid a massive rebellion, but the Speaker clear his motive was all about MP safety.
Security of all members really matters. It is taken very seriously in this House. It is ongoing. I'm having serious conversations about what we do going forward.
Support from government giving him some breathing space as the leader of the Commons turned her fire on Labour.
I would ask all honourable members not to do this House a further disservice by suggesting that the shameful events that took place yesterday were anything other than party politics.
But the SNP irreconcilable, saying Hoyle has to go.
Lindsay Hoyle no longer retains the confidence of SNP MPs to continue in his role. I have massive, even bigger concerns about the fact that Sir Keir Starmer met with Lindsay Hoyle prior and privately to that decision being made.
The Labour leader adamant there wasn't a stitch-up with the Speaker to avoid a rebellion on his own benches.
I can categorically tell you that I did not threaten the Speaker in any way whatsoever. I simply urged him to ensure that we had the broadest possible debate.
But the PM adamant that allowing concerns over MPs' safety to influence business in the Commons not acceptable.
I think the important point here is that we should never let extremists intimidate us into changing the way in which Parliament works.
But back in Parliament, many are increasingly concerned about the welfare of MPs. How serious is the issue of MPs' safety?
So I sit on the House of Commons Commission and I speak to the same security professionals as the Speaker does. I was answering questions in the Chamber today on behalf of the Commission around Member of Parliament security. Mr. Speaker, he's obsessed with making sure colleagues are kept safe.
This the week Parliament finally backed an immediate ceasefire in Gaza. But this significant moment drowned out by the spectacle of wrangling and rows that brings no credit to this place or its politicians. Beth Rigby, Sky News, Westminster.
Well, while MPs at Westminster argued about the vote on Gaza, Israel's offensive against Hamas in Gaza itself continued. Health officials there say at least 48 people have been killed in Israeli strikes in the last 24 hours. Aid agencies today called on the UN to back an immediate ceasefire, as our Middle East correspondent Alistair Bunkle reports from Jerusalem.
As British politicians have been arguing over political process in Westminster, the Israeli military has continued fighting Hamas in Gaza, and the humanitarian situation amongst Palestinian civilians is getting worse there. Although Israel hasn't yet launched a ground invasion of Rafah, they have carried out more airstrikes on the town in the south of Gaza. 4 people were killed when a mosque and residential building were hit in the last 24 hours.
The mosque was struck by 2 rockets. See all those houses that were destroyed here? They were houses for displaced people and people coming from outside. The whole block and the one behind us was totally destroyed, as you can see.
More than 1 million Palestinians are sheltering in Rafah. The Israeli government has threatened to invade if the hostages taken by Hamas on October the 7th aren't released by Ramadan in just over 2 weeks' time. International aid organisations and an increasing number of foreign governments, including the British and American, are warning Israel not to launch the operation. In reality, a vote in the House of Commons in Westminster is not going to change the course of the war in Gaza. It's not going to change the opinion of the Israeli government, and it's not going to change opinions here at the Israeli Knesset. But it does signal a growing shift in global opinion amongst lawmakers around the world that a ceasefire in Gaza is now needed sooner rather than later. Today, the aid organisation Médecins Sans Frontières gave this warning to the UN Security Council.
For 138 days, we have done everything we can to enact a meaningful humanitarian response. For 138 days, we have watched the systematic obliteration of a health system we have supported for decades. We have watched our patients and our colleagues be killed and maimed. This situation is the culmination of a war Israel is waging on the entire population of the Gaza Strip. A war of collective punishment, a war without rules, a war at all costs.
On Wednesday night, a Jordanian Air Force plane dropped British humanitarian aid for a hospital in northern Gaza. It is one of the only ways to get aid into the north of the Strip right now. There is a desperate need on the ground for the most basic supplies: food, water, medicine. People are looting trucks for whatever they can get. The UN is struggling to deliver aid to some areas of Gaza. It is images like these that are driving politicians and diplomats around the world to try and find an end to the fighting. Alistair Buncombe, Sky News in Jerusalem.
A privately owned lunar lander is potentially just over an hour away from making history as it attempts to touch down on the moon following a week-long voyage. The Nova C Odysseus spacecraft is expected to land at crater Malapert A near the moon's south pole. If successful, it would be the first US touchdown on the moon in more than 50 years and the first ever by a private spacecraft. And our science correspondent Thomas Moore joins me in the studio. So, Thomas, what is happening and how big a deal is it?
It is a big deal because of all the firsts that you talk about. The first since the Apollo 17, the first by a private company, if it's successful, and the first to the South Pole. All really exciting, and the South Pole is really challenging. Let's take a close look at the spacecraft itself. This is Odysseus. It's about the same size as a phone box. There you can see it. It's testing navigational aids and other equipment that should make landing on the moon much easier in the future, because about half of missions have failed up to now. Now, it's due to touch down at the Malapert A crater, about 200 miles from the unexplored South Pole. The terrain is really rugged, though, and hazardous for a spacecraft, particularly one that's landing on its own, no human intervention. Now, why take that risk? Well, the pole has craters that are permanently in shadow, where the temperature is as low as minus 230 degrees, and the big hope is that they will contain an awful lot of water ice, and that could sustain human missions.
And as you say, a lot of missions aren't successful. We've had various timings from the day. It's clear that they can't really pinpoint exactly when this is going to happen because of the complexity of it all.
Absolutely right. They want to make sure that the spacecraft is in tip-top condition before they actually press the button and fire those engines that will slow it from about 4,000 miles an hour down to walking speed. Now, that will happen over a period of about an hour. It is due to land at the moment at 24 minutes past 11, so we should be hearing any time now that those engines have fired, that the descent has begun. It will first go down to about 6 miles above the surface and then slowly descend to walking speed, and it will do it on its own, looking for exactly the right spot to land where it won't topple over, hopefully, and everything will be all right.
How excited are you?
Very.
Thomas, for the moment, thank you. See you a little later on. Thank you. And a reminder that, all being well, you can watch that moon landing attempt here on Sky News at around 11:24 p.m. tonight, as Thomas has just told us. Now, the conflict in Ukraine has given the leadership of NATO far greater prominence, and the outgoing Dutch Prime Minister, Mark Rutte, is in a strong position to become the next NATO Secretary-General, with the backing of several countries, including the UK. The US, France, Germany and Britain all announced support today for Mr Rutte. He succeeds Jens Stoltenberg when he steps down from the alliance's top post in October. He's the Netherlands' longest-serving leader. Amongst the top priorities for whomever gets the job will be keeping up support for Ukraine's defence against Russia as it enters its third year, and crucially stopping an escalation that would draw NATO members into war with Moscow under the principle that an attack on one is considered an attack on all. Estonia is one of the 6 NATO countries that share a land border with Russia and has warned of a possible attack within the next decade. Much of Estonia's border crosses a lake, but the city of Narva in the northeast is only separated by a river and is seen as a point of vulnerability. Growing tensions with Russia have prompted more ordinary Estonians to join a volunteer defence force, including off the west coast of the country, so that people are prepared for the worst. From the island of Hiiumaa, our security and defence editor, Deborah Haynes, sent this report.
These are no ordinary soldiers. Their commander calls them the SAS. It stands for Saturdays and Sundays, because that's when Estonia's citizen army trains. An example of national service that some say countries like the UK ought to follow as the threat from Russia grows.
and move.
The commander has a warning for Moscow if it tries to invade Estonia after Ukraine.
It will be bloody mess if you come here.
And what's your message to other NATO countries that maybe aren't doing as much to mobilise
Wake up. It won't stop in Ukraine. If we don't stop them there, they will come further and further.
These volunteers on Hiiumaa Island off Estonia's western coast didn't need any wake-up call. A group of 15 mainly middle-aged dads joined this unit of the Defence League last year, in part because of the war in Ukraine. Tavi says he doesn't want conflict, but he's ready for combat if Russia attacks.
I have to take the weapon and trying to protect my family, my home.
And why is your island so important to you?
It's my home. It's easy.
This island of some 9,000 people would be an attractive target for Vladimir Putin in any war with NATO, giving him the ability to control access to the Baltic Sea. Another potential flashpoint is this place back on the mainland. The city of Narva sits on one side of the river, with Russia's Ivangorod on the other. A crossing point called the Friendship Bridge still connects the two foes.
It's hard to believe that this is the very edge of NATO's border and Russia is just a few metres behind me. But any attempt by Russian forces to cross that line would trigger an Allied response.
Yet not everyone who lives in Narva would want defending. A majority of its residents speak Russian and some are sympathetic to Moscow. Yuri is loyal to Estonia, but says he could never regard Russia as an enemy.
There are problems between the governments, not the people. We regularly go to Russia to visit our friends and family.
But if large-scale conflict does return to Europe, everyone will need to pick a side and be ready to fight for it. Deborah Haynes, Sky News, Estonia.
Ahead of the second anniversary of the invasion, the UK Foreign Office today imposed a new set of sanctions on Russia's military. They include 50 individuals and organisations and seek to limit President Vladimir Putin's weapons supplies and finances. Yesterday, Sky's economics and data editor, Ed Conway, revealed the extent to which British goods were still making their way into Russian hands. His report prompted this response from the Defence Secretary.
I did read at length the Ed Conway excellent thread this morning talking about this issue. And it is, I think, the case that when you set up sanctions, initially they tend to work. And then, rather like water flowing around a boulder in a stream, they'll eventually work their way around and find another route to markets.
Former Brazil and Barcelona footballer Dani Alves has been jailed for 4.5 years after he was convicted of rape. A court in Spain found him guilty of attacking a woman in a Barcelona nightclub in 2022. More than 3,000 people are spending another night away from their homes in Plymouth after a suspected Second World War bomb was found in a back garden. Devon and Cornwall police have cordoned off more than 1,000 properties in the Kym area and have drafted in hundreds of volunteers to help those ordered out of their homes. Reports of Islamophobia in the UK have hit a record high since Hamas's attack on Israel on October the 7th last year. Figures from the agency Tell Mama, which monitors anti-Muslim hate crime, show a significant increase over the past 4 months. Since the attack, the agency has recorded more than 2,000 cases of Islamophobia. During the same period in the previous year, 600 cases were recorded. That means the number of incidents has increased by 235% since the Hamas attack. And Tell Mama says that women were targeted in more than 65% of the attacks. Our North of England correspondent Greg Milam reports from Manchester.
It was 5th of February, 2:30 a.m. in the morning. I heard the smashing of the window and I realized that there is a large brick on the floor.
Mahitab says her home was targeted because of the Palestinian flag she put in her window.
The police told me when they saw the brick, they said it could have killed me.
She's chosen to speak publicly to put pressure, she says, on police and councils to take anti-Muslim hate seriously.
I'll not be terrified by those people. They will not stop me from doing what I need to do. They will not stop me from supporting the case I believe is right. I've never thought about changing how I look because of these things, because this is me. I am a Muslim, and this is how we look like.
The police told her they couldn't find the person responsible, and she is one victim among many in what's been a dramatic increase in anti-Muslim hate since the Hamas attacks on Israel on October the 7th. And the figures showed that in almost 2/3 of those incidents, the victims were women.
Anti-Muslim hatred is gendered. Women tend to be targeted because of sexism, misogyny, as well as their visibility, either being Muslim, wearing a headscarf, being of Asian background, speaking a different accent, or being Middle Eastern. But mainly driven by language which is sexist. It's usually a male-to-female violence, where the individual feels that he can have a go at a woman because they feel that they're weak, and definitely not. And equally as well have anti-Muslim slurs attached to that.
The British Muslim Heritage Centre in Manchester has always been much more than just a place of worship. Now it's also a centre where hate crimes can be officially reported, something that many are reluctant to do.
I think there are many reasons why it's underreported, and also I think they don't understand what constitutes a hate crime. So if it's just a bit of verbal abuse, they think, oh, well, that's okay, because maybe people have been used to it. But I think we're living in a day and age where, no, that is not acceptable, and hate crime must be reported.
Like the rise in anti-Semitism, it is happening online and on the streets. And campaigners say social cohesion is at risk unless everyone stands up to it. Greg Milam, Sky News.
It has long been a taboo in society, with women claiming that they were being discriminated against in the workplace. But employers could now be sued if they fail to make reasonable adjustments for those going through the menopause. The Equality and Human Rights Commission says symptoms such as hot flushes, brain fog and sleeping difficulties can be considered a disability, and bosses should consider how to help those women affected. Alice Porter reports.
I was struggling with lots of hot sweats and through the night hardly getting any sleep.
Like millions of women across the country, Maureen found the menopause a nightmare. So much so, she almost quit her job.
I'd been here 10 years and I loved my job, but I knew I couldn't do it anymore and I would have to leave. It was heartbreaking.
Now the Equalities and Human Rights Commission say if menopause symptoms have a long-term and substantial impact on a woman's ability to carry normal day-to-day activities, these symptoms could be considered a disability. Maureen got the help she needed and kept her job at the University of Greenwich. She now uses her experience to inform their policies.
We now do in-house training to line managers and to staff for awareness. Instead of having just one of that piece of uniform, you'd be provided with 2 or 3, because you could be having hot sweat and need to change through the day.
The Fawcett Society say 1 in 10 women working during the menopause quit their jobs because of the symptoms. Campaigners say it makes economic sense to try and keep these women in the workplace. The university's Vice-Chancellor says supporting menopausal women is good for business.
If we can just make some very small tweaks, which is what it often is, that gives them then re-gives them, if you like, the confidence to do their jobs, then actually they perform better for us.
While campaigners welcome this guidance from the Equality and Human Rights Commission, some worry it could stigmatise women.
If menopause is designated as some form of disability, then our periods is pregnancy. And for the very things that make us unique to be designated as a disability rather than an absolutely natural part of our bodies' lives is really complicated, I think, and difficult, and sends out perhaps quite negative messaging.
While debate may continue over whether menopause symptoms are a disability, the news that workplaces are being encouraged to help women through a challenging stage in their life will be welcomed by many. Alice Porter, Sky News.
Well, that was Sky News at 10. Coming up, we'll take a first look at tomorrow's newspapers in the press preview. Tonight, we're joined by Daily Express columnist and broadcaster Carol Malone and Belfast Telegraph columnist Alison Morris. Amongst the stories we'll be discussing, this story on the front of the Eye on the second anniversary of the start of the war in Ukraine. Their headline, 2 years of lunacy. We'll be right back. Do stay with us. Welcome back. You're watching Sky News. In just a moment, the press preview. A first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. But first, our top stories. President Biden has met Alexei Navalny's wife and daughter as his mother accuses Russian investigators of blackmailing her over the body of her son. A motion of no confidence in the Commons Speaker is gathering pace as he apologised to MPs for his handling of last night's chaotic Gaza debate in the Commons. And the lunar mission that could see the first American landing on the moon for 50 years is entering its final moments. The unmanned probe is due to touch down in the next hour. You are watching the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. It's time to see what's making the headlines with Daily Express columnist and broadcaster Carol Malone and Alison Morris from the Belfast Telegraph. They'll be with us from now until just before midnight. So let's see what's on some of those front pages for you now. Well, to mark the second anniversary of Russia invading Ukraine, the Metro details the chilling war zone statistics at what it calls 2 years of lunacy. Meanwhile, the Telegraph speaks to a Ukrainian soldier who has Russian troops in his sights but no ammunition. The Express demands to know why police didn't stop what it calls anti-Semitic slur being beamed onto the side of Big Ben by pro-Palestinian activists. That story is also the lead in tomorrow's Daily Mail. The Guardian carries a study which says that seeing the same GP on every visit improves patient health and reduces the doctor's workload. The Mirror speaks to a pensioner on day release about his regrets over smuggling £1 million worth of cocaine on a cruise ship. The Times has been investigating the tactics of charity fundraisers, some of whom it says use fake tears and tricks to garner donations. The Eye claims an exclusive with news of a possible new deal on trade with the EU in food and cars if Labour wins the next general election. The FT leads with stellar profits at computer chip maker Nvidia, which have sparked a surge in technology stocks on world markets. The Sun pictures singer Ellie Goulding on holiday with a man that the paper says is not her husband. And rough justice, The Star says it's been a bad day for Joe Biden's dog after it repeatedly bit his Secret Service detail, and for the world's oldest dog, which has been stripped of its title. Bad day for dogs. A reminder that by scanning the QR code you'll see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers while you watch us. And we are joined tonight by Carol and Alison. Good to see you both. Let us start with the Metro front page and that stark headline, 2 years of lunacy, referring to the second anniversary of the war in Ukraine. Vladimir Putin is pictured on their front page. Carol.
Yes, this is, second anniversary, and the Metro has, a lot of the things that have happened. It says in 730 days, Putin has fired 8,000 missiles, targeted 828 hospitals, 10,000 Ukrainians died. And the headline asks, for what? And, we're all still asking, for what? I don't know how this is going to end. I don't know when it's going to end or how it's going to end or what the end game is, because Ukraine is not going to give up. And they've said, and has said so many times, and he's going to keep on going, and we can't let him win. And I think the West now, I think when these things go on for wars like this go on for this length of time, for the first year, I remember every paper carried a story about it every single day, and recognition of it was high. It's not now. We're not talking about Ukraine as much anymore, and people are still dying in the numbers that they were last year, if not more, and we've forgotten about it, and the pressure is not on anymore to give Ukraine the weapons that we were giving them in the beginning, and I just wonder how long it's going to go on for and how it's going to play out, because Putin is clearly not going to give up, and it feels a bit to me like the West has given up. I don't know.
Alison, your thoughts?
Well, when this war first started, we were told it was going to be over really quickly, that this is going to be, a very quick war, that Ukraine was obviously being armed to the tens of millions worth of weapons and training that was being given to them by other Western countries. It hasn't. And 2 years on, I think it's quite clear now that if neither side are backing down, then all you can do is fight to annihilation. And at some stage, there has to be some diplomacy. Can you negotiate with someone like Putin? I mean, I don't know how many of you have watched that Tucker Carlson interview, which started, like the world's most boring history lesson.
Loosely described as an interview.
Yes, the world's most boring history lesson, and then went on to something that you can see from the sort of rambling and probably the arrogance of Putin that he isn't going to back down anytime soon. But there are people who he would listen to, and I do think that Ukraine as well, they need support. But the difference is that what has happened, I suppose, in the Middle East and what's going on at the minute in Gaza has taken the headlines off what's going on in Ukraine. And what I will say is the difference is, remember that the humanitarian issues around Ukraine, as in bringing those Ukrainian refugees out of there, making sure that women and children were safe, we haven't seen that with other conflicts that are happening around the world at the same time.
Let's take a look at the Telegraph front page, also dealing with the war in Ukraine with Russia. And the quote there, I have the Russian soldiers in my sights, but no shells to fire at them. So the will there to continue fighting, but being let down by not having the equipment to do so. Carol.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is the case. It's to say, when Boris was in power, he was right on Ukraine, and he was pushing the rest of the world, particularly America, but the rest of the world, into arming the country. And now he's not there, and I don't hear any big voice. Europe had to be pushed into giving them weapons in the first place, and I just don't hear any big voice now. And these people are fighting a war. It's like we always said if there was another war anywhere, it would not be a hand-to-hand war because of technology and all the rest. This is a hand-to-hand war. This is people fighting on fields, with guns and shells. And if they don't have it, if they don't have the shells to fire, I mean, what are they going to do? More people are going to die, which of course is what Putin wants. I just caught a glimpse of the story today. I didn't read it, but there's a story about Putin's telling people he sold weapons to, he wants them back because he's clearly running out as well. So he wants weapons he sold to other countries back. But you've got to feel sorry for Ukrainians. They did nothing. Russia marched into their country for no reason other than Putin wanted it. And here they are having to fight. And they won't give up, They have a spirit the like of which I have not seen since the Bosnian War.
Just think since the beginning of time, trying to fix wars by continually throwing more and more weapons at different countries and saying, here are a lot more missiles. Now, if you have bigger missiles than that guy, that you'll win. This hasn't happened. It's 2 years on. I think that at some stage we need to see, and I know a lot of this is to do with NATO and what was allegedly happening in terms of Ukraine's membership of NATO and all of that, but I do think that there is a time when someone, and I don't know who, in terms of the influence around the world, needs to say, we could fire shells at each other from now till the end of time, and it's not going to end this conflict.
But the thing is, when you have a leader like, with lots of leaders, they're difficult to negotiate with. But Putin is impossible because he thinks Ukraine belongs to him, and he's not going to give up until he gets it. Look at the way it was. When we were negotiating with Ireland, there was a time when we thought we couldn't negotiate.
Well, people said you couldn't negotiate and it wouldn't happen, and it did.
And it did. That's why
I'm always a fan of the fact that people say they won't negotiate, but really, I think that nobody, including the Russians, because the Russians were entirely behind Putin at the start of this. And I mean, I've visited Moscow and I've seen he's almost held in cult-like status among many Russians. I do think that they are now coming weary of this, and it's when the pressure comes from within and within his own people that maybe that might change. Because apparently I do think that when you're getting to a situation where we have, this guy on the front of the Telegraph going, just send me more shells and I'll kill more Russian soldiers. But yet we're 2 years in, that hasn't, they had millions and multi-millions of pounds worth of weapons sent to them at the start of this war, and it hasn't ended it.
Yeah, no, it hasn't shifted, and as you say, expected to last a couple of days, and we're on the second anniversary. Let's take a look at the Express front page. And this is the pro-Palestine demonstration that took place on Wednesday night, and the image that was beamed onto the side of Big Ben, many describing that as anti-Semitic and asking why the police allowed this to take place.
I think this will anger an awful lot of people, especially when inside Parliament, when this was happening, MPs were talking about the threats that they had been having from Islamist extremists and how scared and how frightened they were. And here we have a group of pro-Palestinian activists outside chanting terrible slogans. We have them projecting this image onto Parliament. It was it's the Queen Elizabeth Tower with the words "From the river to the river to the sea, Palestine will be free." Now, and we have hordes of police. I don't know if you can see it on this. Hordes of police standing by, doing absolutely nothing. This is what angers people. That this can happen. And the cops have said tonight, well, a crime wasn't committed. Well, wasn't it? this is anti-Semitic. This offends the Jewish people in this country, and this, if anything, could be classed as a hate crime. This could, and yet police are doing nothing, and we wonder why MPs are being threatened on a daily basis by Islamists. They're saying they are. We're wondering why parliamentary procedure is being tampered with because MPs are frightened, and it's because neither the cops nor the government are doing anything about it. For a long time now, not just this country, but in Europe, we have ignored the threat, and this is what's happening.
But Alison, the police are saying that it's not a criminal offence.
Hate crime legislation, as I know from my own work when I'm covering I'm a crime reporter, is very vague and it's not specific, and it's very difficult to prove an offence. And I do understand why some people might be angry at this, but I get angry at different things, such as watching little children being pulled from rubble, or people having to eat, cattle fodder in order to survive, people going to refugee camps and being bombed. And I do think that people have a right to protest against that and put pressure on their MPs to try and push for a humanitarian ceasefire in that region. Now, whether this is the right way to go about it or not, Carol and I will disagree entirely with that. But I do think that you could see what is going on and the split in the country, even in terms of those MPs from what went on. The argument now, the Speaker is being called on to resign. I think he managed to do something amazing, which was unite Conservatives and the SNP together. Who saw that coming? But what is really happening, and I do think that the Western leaders, especially, and we're talking America.
But what he did was hideous, Alison. Don't gloss over what he actually did. Yeah. What Lindsay Hoyle did was hideously, appallingly wrong. He favoured a side that he used to be part of, and his excuse was he was protecting MPs. If you want to protect MPs, do not tamper with parliamentary procedure. Do not tamper with the rules and regulations of the land and our sacred parliament. Go after the Islamists who are threatening our MPs.
Well, the
That's the
Speaker's
solution.
job is very specific, and they are meant to leave entirely their own party politics behind and be, entirely impartial during that role. And as you know, it comes.
But he wasn't impartial.
And he was, he wasn't. And he's admitted he wasn't. And I think that anyone watching that absolute shambles.
Well, I don't know that he's admitted that
he has apologised.
He admitted he made the wrong decision.
Yes,
that he made
a mistake.
Wrong decision in terms of procedure.
I don't think he's admitted he was.
I think his argument was he didn't follow procedure as he should have, but that he was doing it for honourable reasons, trying to protect the security of MPs. And we know that MPs are under increasing threat and have been for some time.
But we should also we've also got to look at Starmer in all of this. The story, we know that he had a conversation with Lindsay Hoyle before he went into the chamber. Starmer denies that he was. Starmer is entitled to lobby him. What he's not entitled to do is intimidate him or
which he said he
make
didn't
him do something. What?
Which he said he didn't do.
Well, he said. Well, yeah, we believe everything.
I do think that
Starmer says, of course we do. But also, Sue Gray was lurking around in the corridors as well. So Hoyle, what it feels like to me and to a lot of other people, which is why there's been this revolt against him, that he was put under pressure to do what he did.
I do think Keir Starmer's leadership in this has been out of step with many of the members of his party. Had he come out stronger at the start with a line in terms of a humanitarian ceasefire and calling for that immediately, instead of this fudged line and trying to dance around it and try to keep both sides on board, and it has resulted in,
Alison,
I think, him losing a lot of support in terms of his own party.
We must leave it there only because of time. Thank you both for the moment. We're going to take a break. Coming up, more from the front pages, including this in the Eye, their headline: new Brexit deal on food and cars could be agreed with Labour, say EU officials. Stay with us for more.
In short, it's to raise money for charity. That was the bottom line of all of this. It's my fourth backwards challenge. They've gradually got bigger and bigger and higher. So I think this now is probably going to be the highest point I'll go to on the planet. But I lost my granddad to a heart attack a few years ago. And it was not just that, but also the stats and the numbers that come along with this that just blew my mind. So along with doing something for the world's first, so no one's ever been up and down Kilimanjaro backwards, and to raise some money for the British Heart Foundation, it seemed like a real sort of no-brainer. As you can see from some of this content, it's still a bit of a blur for me. I only got back a little under a week ago, so some of these videos that I sent over, it's pretty amazing to look back on. It's not easy doing either, if I'm honest. So going up to the summit, of course, you've got all the altitude involved. There's some really arduous tracks. You've got some pretty uneven pathways. But coming down, as you saw in that last clip there, it's pretty steep and it's loose shingle, so there's lots of slips, lots of falls. We use that short rope technique as well, just to keep me a little bit safer. And I'd probably said if you made me choose, coming down was a little bit harder than going up, which is maybe why the other two guys didn't do it in the first place. But yeah, amazing challenge. And it also made me the first European ever to make it to the summit. So these other two guys from all over the world have made it up to the summit, but no one from Europe before. It's a funny old thing. I'm a personal trainer, so the training thing was quite easy. And really the idea of training to do something quite specific, you just do that thing that's specific. So the more you work on that, the easier it becomes. If you want to get good at riding a bike, ride a bike more. It's kind of that simple. Unfortunately, as you said there, we don't have much altitude here in the UK. We don't really have anywhere to practice higher. And also, I would say it was the sort of intangibles that I found really challenging. The porters and the food was also amazing out there. However, you kind of get a little bit sick of spaghetti by the end of the day. You're sleeping and sharing tents, so things like smells, things like packing your bag at the end of the day and unloading it at the start of the day. You didn't really prepare for it. I know physically not that challenging, just adds to a little bit more of the challenge, which I really, really didn't expect before heading out there.
Welcome back. You are watching the press preview. Still with me, Daily Express columnist and broadcaster Carol Malone and Belfast Telegraph columnist Alison Morris. Let's take a look at the Eye and this intriguing story. A new Brexit deal could be on the cards, according to EU officials, for a new Labour government, should they win the general election.
What I can see from what the Eye are saying, it looks very similar to what we have in Northern Ireland, because we have completely different Brexit arrangements, obviously because we have a border with the rest of the EU. Therefore, we have what they call the Windsor Framework, which gives us access still to the EU single market. This looks like a softening of the stance to bring the entire then of the United Kingdom into line, which means the rest of it becoming into line with what we already have in Northern Ireland. We were told that's the best of both worlds, but that is a very soft Brexit, and that wouldn't have went down well, I think, with the hardline Brexiteers. This is more similar to what Theresa May was offering, that sort of backstop deal. It's very aligned to that. That was rejected, obviously, outright. But I think that since Brexit, and we have seen some of the shambles that have came from that, and in terms as well as some of the difficulties that businesses are having, this maybe could be the answer. But I'm surprised that the EU have agreed to go back and negotiate, because we're continually told, especially in Northern Ireland, where we have issues around Brexit, that those trade arrangements are over, those negotiations have finished.
Well, there would need to be a review in 2026 anyway, wouldn't there, Carol?
Well, it would, and I mean, you're wondering why they'd want to renegotiate, because I suspect they'll want some money from us to renegotiate, which is what they missed, the fact that we're not there. But I mean, I just think this is just so typical of Labour. Brexit is done. We're never going to go back. It's done. We're just going to have to deal with it how it is and make it work and all the rest of it. And here he is. He's not even in power yet. He's so confident of getting into power that he's now saying out loud, this is what's going to happen. This is a betrayal of Brexit. It's a total betrayal of Brexit.
But is it a bad thing to want to forge a closer partnership with Europe? To boost the economy?
We've got quite a close partnership with you, but, you know, many people will think this is just the start. This is just the first thing that Starmer will do. What's he going to do next to have even closer ties? He wants to go back into the EU. He's always, you know, we've always known that. And I just think this is a betrayal of the deal. And it's silly now because things are starting to happen here. We've got lots of trade agreements on the go now. Things are working. We're in better shape than a lot of Europe now. And I just think it is insanity now to talk about going back in.
Well, we've mentioned the B word and we know we can talk all night about it. So let's move to the Daily Star. On the bad day for dogs, Alison, you've got about 10 seconds.
It's not really a bad day for dogs, it's a bad day for Secret Service agents, I think. Because we're told that Joe Biden's dog has bit his security detail 24 times in 9 months. Yeah, if you or I owned that dog, it would have been taken off
down a long
time ago. But President Biden
and it's
apparently
it's a big old Alsatian, isn't it?
He's given it a reprieve every time, isn't he?
He's living to see another day. For the moment, thank you very much for taking us through the papers, Carol and Alison. Let's take a look at the weather for you now.
Warm memories wherever you go. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Well, after an exceptionally mild February so far, it'll feel colder over the next few days as temperatures return to near average. Friday will start chilly with a frost in places, most widespread in the north. Expect sunny spells and heavy showers through the morning, but central and eastern England, eastern Scotland and eastern Ireland look mainly dry. The heaviest showers will bring the risk of hail and thunder with sleet or snow possible on some hills. It'll feel colder than recently, especially in the brisk wind. The afternoon will be similar, but showers will extend into eastern parts before fading during the evening.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.